Hey guys, this is RuRoniK95 here, and once again, it's time for another manga review video. And yes, looking back on how I've already looked back on my previous manga review where I covered my manga review on the Devilman vs. Hades manga, today I'm going to be doing a manga review, which is basically something that I haven't thought of doing one before, which I forgot to do one, which I hadn't felt like, which maybe I probably forgot one to do, which I should have done. And yet, this is basically an anime. A manga is basically takes place in high school, and with some slice of life and some moments on there. And yes, this is the one I'm going to be doing, that I'm going to be talking about for today's manga review. We're going to be reviewing Azumanga Daioh, the manga that is created by Kyohiko Azuma, which I think this is basically consider the fact of how this basically takes place in a school setting, like in around maybe high school particularly. But I know this has some characters on there included, and yeah, of how, just to consider the fact of how we'll get to the characters in just a moment at this part as well, because I know there's a lot going on as well happening in Azumanga Daioh, and yeah, as well, the story basically of how it starts off of how it takes place of how these girls were in high school, particularly of how when they were going through every lives of how their daily life in school, of how they wanted to do this just in order to get starting these exams to get into colleges, of how what they do in Azumanga Daioh. There is basically of how everything's happening in school. For example, like lots of them in general, like swimming clubs, other school activities of all stuff, or it's getting the school works just to get their school academic work happening of all this, and everything they have been working, how they got to, and also trips to Chiyo's summer beach house when they were going on a trip as well, on every other occasions of stuff, particularly of how this goes on, of how what's happening in Azumanga Daioh as well. Because, well, we all know the story is about, though. And even in the characters, what we got in Azumanga Daioh, you have the characters such as Sakaki, who is basically the one who likes animals, especially cats or any kind of animals that Sakaki likes, and particularly, but when she is always soft-spoken when she is ever available to talk with her friends as well. And then you got Osako, what's her name? Osaka, who is over-the-top person who is in teenage life, how they did in school as well. You have the brash Kagura, and then you have other characters. Yes, Osaka is the spaced out one. Chiyo-chan is the only character who is basically the youngest girl, who is like at the age of 10 years old. Like, how did she get into high school? I mean, isn't she, like, in middle school? I mean, this is, like, how a difficult time of how what every character at that age has been attended high school. Yeah. And then you have this other teacher who's basically just goes all hilariously awkwardly, though. Like, the female teacher one, who thinks that she claimed that she doesn't want to be a teacher, but in reality, she is actually a teacher as well. And then you got this other teacher guy who wears the glasses, who's basically wanted to know what these girls are up to to this own certain way. But that's more different than before, of how, just to consider the fact of how they got, yeah, even particularly how, what this goes, especially considering how these other girls that are are in the same classroom as Chiyo and Osaka and Sakaki, were always attending school, especially in the same classroom, studying their work in order to get themselves to graduation through their daily lives at school. Just to consider how they wanted to do this is a whole thing of how they wanted to do particularly. Yeah. Because they were fumbled their way in order to graduate from school into the future, when they were basically, they start to study their exams in order to get into college, what they had a lot to do for, as considering how they do this. So that's why they have been doing other types of school things of how they did in school. Yeah. Especially in Azumanga Daioh, such as gym classes, swimming classes, and other curricular activities during their life in school, of what they do, particularly of how, just to consider about how Azumanga Daioh explains of how this goes at that part. And we'll get to the story value. Well, we already covered the story though, but I'm talking about how the values in that one as well. Not necessarily like product values. No, it's basically talking about the story plot values of how this progresses, of how this goes as well. Yeah, just to consider how Azumanga Daioh wanted to do this curricular for the credibility of what they do as well. And yes, this is basically your typical slice of life comedy manga, more different before Lucky Star or any other slice of life comedy ones, just to name a few in general. But Azumanga Daioh definitely takes the cake, especially for what it basically comes to, like slice of life comedy, school life, like their everyday life in school when they wanted to make their way through graduation, and for their future, what it's like for them after they graduate from school. And yes, there are all some hilarious moments, basically, like when they're freaking out, and especially of how this female teacher thinks that she wants to always ends up getting almost distracted on all, especially for the curricular of how what these students are. But it has its moments, though, especially in the Azumanga Daioh manga overall, though. Yeah, because this is got any reasonable, questionable thoughts about this manga, hasn't it? I mean, I don't get why the character Chiyo-chan, who is the brainy character, attended at high school at the age of 10. Like, how did she do that? I mean, isn't she's supposed to be in, like, middle school or junior high? Well, considering that this basically takes place in a high school setting, this is how did they basically wanted to do this? I mean, what is up with these kind of characters like Chiyo-chan ended up in high school? Well, that's the questionable thing of how this basically... Well, you get the picture, though. Ironically, though, about Azumanga Daioh is that this is basically your average slice-of-life comedy manga on there. Unlike the anime adaptation, but I was explaining about the manga accordingly. And its own type of any confidence is that one of the most things of how what they were capable of what they were doing in their everyday life of school, because they don't know what it's going on as well. But I know but I understand why, though. There are some hilarious scenes on there, but it has its moments also, if I'm not mistaken. So, yeah. And this is what they do this. Because there is some 4 panels on there, like putting every types of these kinds of panels in this manga. You would never expect of how this is. There's some parts of the manga that have like these 4 panels of how this is going on. Of how, well, I guess this pretty much is basically, I guess you have to call it those manga titles that have like these 4 panels, unlike any other manga that has more different of its kind. Azumanga Daioh is the primary example of manga that has these 4 panels onto every page of the manga of what their credibility of capable of what they do this. Just before Lucky Star is still a thing, or any other which I think is a best example of considered how Azumanga Daioh has these has these types of panels. Okay, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, there's only 4 panels. But not only you had the 4 panels, there's also your average pages on here of how they do that. Yeah, these are on the other pages besides the 4 panels. As for the 4 panels thing, it's nothing more different than gag mangas on every one of them of its kind. What they got to the point particularly. Well, true is, unlike most manga has these 4 panels, like these 4 panel shots on every page of the manga, just to consider how Azumanga Daioh has every 4 panel shots of all of its certain things of what they got of this, especially for the slice of life comedic parts, what they do this. Yeah. And you also have they got to do accordingly as what they got. This. Because this manga basically focuses on these female characters in every of the manga, of how what they're like is in their everyday school. Oh yeah, the teacher who never wanted to become a teacher, but when she actually is the teacher in the manga, is actually Miss Kurosawa, or whatever you want to like pronounce her name on there. That's the teacher in the manga. Yeah. And also, not only you had that as well, they had these everydays of how these school activities, which there was a lot to go of how just to consider the fact of what they do this. Yeah. Yeah, like this, of what they do in school as well. Like these school activities of what they do this. And also, the height of the characters on there. I mean, the character who is the tallest, I think, probably Sakaki, who, you know, the one who loves cats and who is basically an animal lover. I mean, she's the tallest character in every height of what you see in the manga. Yeah. If I'm not mistaken. Unlike most characters that are every of its kind as well. Yeah. They won the sports meet as well. During the running race as well. Just to basically of how, as a result of how considered that she's basically how had a lot to do for her charisma, unlike most characters in general in the manga, especially for like Azumanga Daioh. Yeah. I mean, Chiyo is the not even tall, unlike Sakaki in Azumanga Daioh, because Sakaki is actually the only character in Azumanga Daioh is the tall one. Yeah, especially despite about the height of the character, especially on every character's personalities of what they have in the manga, especially for a particular series like Azumanga Daioh. Every series has its moments accordingly to the fact as well. Yep. Basically, Sakaki basically always has the love for cats as well. Because despite though that Sakaki is actually an animal lover in the manga as well. And unlike any other characters as well, their everyday life goes in this whole feeling of slice and life goes. I mean, one of my favorite moments I like from the manga, though, is where Sakaki and a friend of hers were hanging out at the beach as well. As well as there's other ones like the school activities of what they were going as well. Because I know there's some comedic, hilarious arts in that, and it also has its moments also. But overall, if any of those who like slice of life manga, Azumanga Daioh is the perfect example for comedic slice of life manga as well. Just to consider how if you ever love reading manga that is from the 2000s, Azumanga Daioh has some of these pretty good story on it. The story was good, and it's very excellent. There's 4 panel shots on this manga, and there are some characters that are well done, and the story was well written. Well, it's basically how the chapters is well written on there. The art design from the manga looks very unique compared to the anime adaptation, because I like the manga adaptation more, though. Well, the anime, you have to be in the mood for to binge watch, but the manga, you have to throw in any time. And overall, if you like this manga, I highly recommend you to check out other mangas that are every one of them. There's a whole lot of manga with some slice of life and comedy on every manga titles out there for your manga recommendation resources as well. My score for the manga, I'm going to give this 10 out of 10. Especially for this particular manga like Azumanga Daioh as well. Yeah, so that's basically how I wanted to come by on reviewing a manga like this. Just to consider the fact of that. So, yeah. This basically how it's gotten to a point, though, is that Azumanga Daioh is basically more different from any other manga on there. More than before. 2 or less for the satisfactory results. Even more of how this to create capable of what this has going. Manga creator Kiyohiko Azuma has not only basically of what he was basically stamped in his credibility of how what he has been working on, if only the dreams of what they were doing, creative work that'll stand the test of time for other manga. He's been done this every other works he's been recently done. If he has done other manga, tour for any manga artist out there, more different from before. I mean, it is the sheer beauty of how what this explains. I mean, it is so different from any other title of manga that hasn't been done before for the work of art, just to consider how. And also, basically, though, that as well. So, and also for my thoughts on the Azumanga Daioh manga, when I first read the manga once, I find it interesting. I think I read it for the 2nd to 3rd time. I really love the manga adaptation. I think I like the manga adaptation more than the anime adaptation, though. Well, the anime adaptation you might want to binge watch. Manga, you have to give it a chance on any time. If you ever been a manga reader, despite that I have been reading a lot of manga, because I wanted to become a manga reader as well. And for my thoughts on the Azumanga Daioh manga, however, I mean, I haven't read the manga for the 3rd time, so I decided to give it a chance, because I think I read it twice, but I'll just give it a chance as a 3rd time to read the manga whenever I felt like as well. Just to consider of how I have gotten introduced to Azumanga Daioh, because I think I like this manga a lot more than other manga. Well, technically, I think I like this manga just as how I like the other manga out there. Hey, I love manga in general, though, because that has given me the reason of how I have got my first discovery on the Azumanga Daioh manga when I read it for the 3rd time as well. But I haven't read the Lucky Star manga to be honest, but I thought this is all new for me, though. For Azumanga Daioh, however, I just find it very fun to read that manga, just to consider how this manga was originally a 4-volume manga, but the version I have, which I'll get to, the version I have is the ADV Film Manga Omnibus edition of it, which consisted all 4 volumes into all-in-one book as a full book-length manga. I mean, this is basically thick, just as the size as those Akira manga volumes as well. And not only that, basically, there is also the new edition of the Azumanga Daioh Omnibus edition available. When I first read the Azumanga Daioh, for my opinion on the Azumanga Daioh manga, I was originally going to read the 4-volume ones, but when I first discovered the Omnibus one, I wanted to read something like you could read all in one for an Omnibus manga like Azumanga Daioh, because that'll get you more quality time in order to do a review on a manga as well. So that's going to be it for my manga review on Azumanga Daioh for today's manga review. Thank you for watching, but before we go, here's what I'm going to say for this one. Even though I have read the Omnibus edition of Azumanga Daioh for the 3rd time, I wanted to get in depth with how I come by on reading manga like all in one for an omnibus like this, because I have been reviewing like most of my manga reviews in the past. This is going to take the cake, though, despite that I love manga in general. Even though I have I read other manga titles, though, because I love reading manga in general as well. Hope subscribe for content. My anime planet, link in the description down below if you want to check out my anime planet. The link will be in the description down below because I have a huge backlog of manga and anime on my anime planet account. And also, if you want to check out my Patreon, link will be in the description down below. You have to be a grown-up to follow me on Patreon. And also, let me know your thoughts in the comments section below about Azumanga Daioh. Let me know about it. Like, what are your thoughts on the Azumanga Daioh manga? And also, be sure to click on the subscribe button. Be sure to subscribe to my channel, RuRoniK95. Feel free to join my channel, especially if you're new to my channel as a newcomer. Smack the notifications bell button. Be sure to get notified also as well for more latest updates on here. Smack the like button if you love this video. And keep it otaku for this manga review, because this is the first time I wanted to review the Azumanga Daioh manga for the first time. That's why. This is RuRoniK95 saying thank you for watching my video. I'm glad you liked it. Hope you enjoy it. Hope to see you soon for the next video. Hope you have a great day. This is RuRoniK95 signing off, and thank you for watching my video, and I will see you soon for more videos. Take care. Bye.